Okay, we have some folks joining us. Hello, welcome. Give everyone a minute. I know we have people from all over the world who are excited that these things are virtual now, so they can join us at any point. Okay. Move all my little boxes around. Okay, terrific. I know folks will continue to stream in, but I'm happy to go ahead and welcome everyone to the 2024 Mercedes Matter Awards Ceremony. I'm Kara Carmack, the Assistant Director of Exhibitions and Public Programs here at the New York Studio School. And I'm delighted that in my role at the school, I've been able to work with 120 of our alums this year from around the world to showcase 175 artworks in this year's alumni exhibition on Artsy. This year's exhibition is particularly special. It coincides with the 60th anniversary of the founding of the New York Studio School by Mercedes Matter, who we can see here. She founded the school, as we know, with a dedicated group of artists on September 23rd, 1964. So next week will be 60th years officially. We celebrate 6 decades of alumni, from those who organized the first classes with Matter to those who most recently joined the ranks of our distinguished and steadfast group of artists this year. The array of work by artists from around the world in this year's show epitomize what Matter described as the open climate of the school. In a 1965 interview that we've just unearthed and we're reproducing in the alumni catalog this year, she declared that things happen through climates. Nobody knows what this school will do, because that's what's fascinating to see what will happen here. You can never predict everything. So every artist who studies at the New York Studio School benefits from and contributes to this climate, which feeds artists to reach their highest potential through the language of seeing and drawing. We recognize the commitment to this vision as embodied by our departing Dean, Graham Nixon, who promulgated the unique mission of the New York Studio School for the past 36 years. In this exciting year of celebration and remembrance, we not only look backward, but we also look forward to the next generations of artists yet to join our community. I'd now like to introduce 2 of my colleagues, Caitlin McDonough and Catherine Bickford. Caitlin is serving as our acting head of school and would like to share a few words with you.
Thank you so much, Kara. On behalf of the entire New York Studio School, I would like to offer my sincere congratulations to each of you, and to thank Samira and Jason for joining as our esteemed jurors this year. The dynamism and the dedication present in this collection of work points to an important through line of study at the school. Artists finding the generative questions that can and certainly do sustain a practice of making throughout one's lifetime. The annual alumni exhibition puts forward this active searching through all of these works on view, fortifying and underscoring this vital network of artists learning from artists through direct experience that continues to sustain us today. I hope to welcome each of you back to 8th Street soon, and look forward to finding more ways for you to be involved from your location anywhere around the world. And with this in mind, I'd like to introduce our new Outreach and Alumni Engagement Officer, Catherine Bickford. Catherine is a painter, a wonderful painter, and an alumna of the school certificate program. We're delighted to have her on staff, and it's my pleasure for you to meet her today.
Thank you, Caitlin and Kara. I'm so honored to be part of the alumni of New York Studio School and so excited to take this new role on. It's such a wonderful, talented group of artists in this network, and I'm just amazed that I'm part of it. So we've had a couple of great events this past summer where we've gotten together at 8th Street. We got together on location in Maine, and we're looking forward to other ways to bring this group together and to share. I think this is such a solid experience every year, the annual exhibition, and it's so amazing to see the talent that exists in our alumni. And I can't wait to be extending the climate of invention to the alumni and beyond. And thanks for having me.
Thanks, Catherine. Thanks, Caitlin. This year's show once again celebrates the inspiring range of work to which artists have dedicated their lives and practice, from painting, drawing, and sculpture to photography, fiber art, and an array of works on paper. To highlight some of the works in the exhibition, I'm truly honored to welcome this year's esteemed jurors, Samira Abbasi and Jason Stopa, who have selected this year's 2024 Mercedes Matter Award winners. I'll begin by introducing Samira and Jason, who will then talk to us about their selections. We'll reserve some time at the end for Q&A. Please submit your questions at any time by clicking on the Q&A button at the bottom of your screen rather than the chat. Samira Abbasi is an artist based in New York. Born in Iran, Abbasi emigrated to London, UK in 1967, where she studied at the Canterbury College of Art. She moved to New York City to co-found the Elizabeth Foundation for the Arts in 1998, where her studio is based and holds a lifetime tenure position. Abbasi's work has been shown at the Met, the British Museum, LACMA, and the 26th Venice Biennale, among others. Her work is in private and public collections worldwide, including the Met, the British Museum, British Government Art Collection, the Gray Art Gallery at NYU, Berger Collection, Donald Rubin Collection, LACMA, Afkhami Collection, and the Brattleboro Museum in Vermont. Her fellowships include Yaddo, Saltonstall, 2 NIFA Awards, a Joan Mitchell Fellowship, and a Pollock Krasner Grant. In 2018, she was nominated for Anonymous Was a Woman. Jason Stopa is a painter and writer living in Brooklyn. He received his BFA from Indiana University Bloomington and his MFA from Pratt Institute in New York. Recent solo shows include Glass Arcadia at Thomas Park in Seoul, Korea in 2024, DIY Paradise at Assembly in Houston in 2023, and Garden of Music at Diane Rosenstein in Los Angeles, also in 2023. Recent group exhibitions include Intuitive Nature, Geometric Roots and Organic Foundations at the Schneider Museum in Ashland, Oregon, and Wayne Thiebaud Influencer, A New Generation at the Manetti Shrum Museum of Art at UC Davis, California. Stopa is Assistant Professor of Fine Arts at the Fashion Institute of Technology, and he's a contributing writer to the Brooklyn Rail, Bomb, Hyperallergic, Art Forum, and Art Critical, among many other art journals. Now, I'll turn it over to both of our jurors to discuss their selections, and we'll start here with Jason with this one.
You know, I thought this was such a interesting selection from Talbot, in that the works that were submitted had these kinds of relationships to a lot of early 20th century French painting, particularly thinking about the tableau and how that has been such a seminal feature for so many of those artists, from Cézanne to Matisse to Derain, even with the Nabi, thinking about artists like Vuillard, where you have a setup between a window, a table, an object, a tablecloth, and this kind of whole elaborate setup, this whole elaborate construction that takes place in terms of forming the image that the artist is going to paint from. And I was taken with the way in which there's a brevity in the handling here, the close value ranges. I just thought that there was something kind of fresh uh, and also not often quite seen in a lot of contemporary painting these days as well. Somebody revisiting some of these themes, and it just immediately caught my eye. I'm not sure, Samira, if you have any thoughts on this painting at all.
Actually, as you're speaking about it, I'm liking it more and more. Yeah, I'm also, I'm thinking about what you said, that the still life, the object in front of a window. It makes me, Matisse, and like you said, we are. But yeah, it's also the greens, and as a painter, we know that green is very difficult to make work and to keep fresh.
Mhm.
So, especially in oil, and this is in oil. So yes, I particularly like the brown and blue vase that the Lily of the Valley is in. And yeah, like you said, it's playful. There's a kind of light touch.
Yeah. So an artist who's working with convention, but somehow trying to keep it fresh and not easy to do.
Mm-hmm. I think this was my first pick as I was going through. And there's something mystical about it, and sort of essentialized and simplified and abstracted, which is not easy to do with landscape, because there's so much that you can pick to summarize into that. And there was also the strength of the black silhouette there in front, like it's almost like a skull, kind of, as I'm looking at it now. And it made me think of these mystical landscape painters around the time of William Blake. I guess that was like, I think it was Samuel Palmer. Anyway, so it made me think of that, but also there's a contemporary feel of sort of Alex Katz and contemporary landscape painting that is sometimes in part of the figure painting, but this is just the naked landscape, which I found quite arresting.
Mm-hmm.
Do you have anything to say, Jason?
Yeah, well, the way in which it also has a sculptural kind of quality to it. Those clouds have a volume, they have a mass that I don't often attribute to a cloud.
Right.
And then what you just mentioned about the trees and the landscape and silhouette, it has almost the opposite effect. They feel light as air. So there's some interesting kinds of qualities taking place there. I agree.
Yeah.
Great. Here we have Jamie Allen's The Spring's Already a Memory.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I like the collage aesthetic in this painting. I mean, it is pastel, oil pastel, watercolor, and collage on paper, but the way in which each one of those areas was handled as a kind of discrete space unto itself. The silhouette of the kind of leaf there in the foreground versus all of the pattern. There's something storybook about this, almost a bit whimsical. I think a lot of my selection wound up I kind of zeroed in on maybe a playful narrative kind of thread that some of these artists were using, and this one seemed to kind of particularly grab me in that way. There's something about that image there in the foreground, that gray black image in the foreground, really feels as though everything else is in deep space in relationship to it. And I think that's a smart way of trying to think about spatial organization in a painting.
Yeah, it also has a printmaking quality to it. Especially the plant silhouette in the foreground. Yeah, I like the play of. I mean, it's a formal play is how I see it. Experimenting with descriptions of space, both shallow and deeper.
Yeah, and for something that's 6 by 5 inches, it packs quite a bit in for something that small, which is also complex in its own right.
Great. Here we have Jeanette Maxey's Dual Perspectives.
The title is so perfect for it. And again, it's small but packs a punch. This idea of painting as seeing and the mirror, and there's a kind of infinitum thing going on in here that I really respond to, just as a metaphor of seeing, and the frame within the frame, and the frame of the glasses, and that it's kind of masterful in so many ways. And then it's got right in the middle, it's got this hole between the reflection of the glasses and the real glasses that is the lock of the composition. And then you've got the shadows as well. So this it's deceptively simple, brilliant, and economical.
And so funny. I mean,
yes.
the way in which this is trying to talk about all of these ideas about perception and seeing in such a literal, matter-of-fact kind of way adds to this kind of deadpan humor about it as a painting. It's really lovely.
Yeah, and it's almost like exasperation, like almost like taking off your glasses and throwing them across the room when you're trying to paint that thing. That also made me think of that too. Yeah, just very. I mean, it makes me think of people like Morandi as well, even though this is not, bottles and a still life. It has that kind of focus. Can we say? Focusing, yeah.
Yeah, bare bones.
Yes.
Yeah.
Great. Here is Amanda Church's Eyelash.
I have known Amanda Church's work for a very long time. I think I first encountered her work maybe in 2013, maybe 2012, at a group show in the Lower East Side. I can't even remember where, but I immediately responded to this kind of pop abstract language that she was working within. All of these kinds of like sharp, hard edges that are then kind of offset by something that feels a bit ornamental or even slightly decorative. It also feels as though in a number of her paintings, there's these like spaces that you kind of see through, but then kind of close back down and create kinds of these window aperture like spaces. And the color is so fresh. There's something about them in person that almost feels like lip gloss or something. There's a real dynamic quality to them. And so when this came up on my screen, I thought, oh, immediately, this feels like it needs to be in this grouping. It has a real presence to it.
Yeah, I think you really opened it up actually for me, because I'm seeing my eye is traveling around it in a different way now, and I particularly like the middle fold triangle of yellow right in the center, and it feels like an origami or a very spliced up version of a 1950s pop art image. And it has all of the clues in it from that sort of language, that era.
Yeah, very much. Yeah.
And just the subtlety of the thickness of line to describe so much.
Yeah, there's a familiarity to them. Like it's like something that I feel like I know, but then I'm ultimately kind of left in a place of unknowing. And I think that's like a really sophisticated way of kind of leading the viewer into the painting.
Great. Here we have Leah Robb, fall 2020, fall 2217.
I think this had a different title when I looked at it in the selection. And it feels like a military map, an image from above, both military and possibly, you know, an alien viewpoint of the Earth. And I think Leah Rubb had another piece in the selection that I looked at that helped me to decipher her. Is it his or her? Yeah. Anyway, to help me to figure out the process. It feels very earthy and muddy. It also feels like there you go. That's it.
Yes, thank you. That was a major error. Yes, Rafa Border. Thank you for pointing that out. Yes, there we go.
And I asked myself, well, you know, what does it matter? You know, whatever this was called, what does it matter? But of course it does. I mean, I know my titles matter to me, and their subject is important enough to actually make a work about. And it's interesting that if the title wasn't there, how would it be interpreted? And the fact that it's mindful of what's going on now, but it seems sort of ancient and biblical at the same time. I really enjoy the use of the kind of earthy, muddy, clay-like materials, and the fact that it's not an image. There's a gouging out of the surface, or the adding of dimensionality to it.
Well, and I'm so surprised that I don't know how I overlooked this, and now as you're talking, it's really kind of opening it up for me. And now that we have the title, even more so, you know, this is like it's an excavation, you know, in many ways.
Yes.
And I think of well, so many 50s painters. Well, de Kooning obviously had a famous painting called Excavation. And I often think of those Clifford Still paintings as kind of being an excavate. They're so sculptural, you know, the space that he's constructing in those things. It's like some deep cavernous space. And I'm like, oh, this is this, like, it's this response. It's such an overlooked thing. We think about transcendence and doom and these unnameable, ineffable kinds of qualities that Abex was after. But in a painting like this, it has some of that same energy, but then it really locates it in a specific place. And there's an excavation happening there too, right? There's a whole unearthing, both in terms of land resources and spiritually, that's happening there. That is just is, and so there's a somberness to it, right? There's a larger kind of dimension that it's working with. It's formal, it's material, but then it's doing this work that is kind of outside of the painting as well. And I think that's an interesting thing about the way that this title leads us into the complexity of the work.
And it's like the message is, let's zoom out and look at the map. Let's look at the territory as forms of line, you know, to give it some kind of objective reality.
Yeah. Yeah, something about trying to depict horror without having faces, names, bodies, but looking at a site and then thinking about what a site can elicit in terms of response. You know, it leads us there, leaves us as a viewer in that space to contend with and grapple with all of those unreconciled dimensions.
Mhm.
Great. Up next, we have Stephanie Frank's Horseshoe Bay.
There's an interesting little back and forth there between that last painting and this one in terms of the
Yeah.
perspective. I'm
Yeah.
inclined to see this now as an aerial kind of view from some vantage point. Which I like that in these alumni shows there can be maybe these moments in which one painting across the room can speak to another that might have a very different starting point, orientation. I like this one for its there's something about the way in which this artist is able to render those small little areas with a kind of exactitude and intentionality about the mark that feels really quick and fresh and decisive on a tiny little scale at 10 by 6 inches. I like the monochromatic nature of this painting. When I saw this originally, I thought, oh, this is a large work. This is like a, you know, 50 by 60 painting or something, and was surprised by its actual size scale relationship. So I think another moment where like intimacy can also kind of feel grand.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it does register as a large painting. And I really enjoy the kind of the blue brush strokes, which is then, you know, torn up or, you know, drawn out with scissors and reapplied. And it's just a very, it's the kind of painting that you see that makes you want to paint. It's kind of delicious, and you know, I really enjoy it when people make painting look easy.
Mm-hmm.
And this is of that category.
Yeah, that's not easy to do or to pull off, right? That sense of labor. There's something very immediate about the entire image that is satisfying.
Here we have Craig Hood's Family of Shadows.
Oh my goodness. I just, I looked at it and I looked at it, and then it began to emerge. And it's so dark, mysterious, and it opens slowly. And then I think Craig Hood had another piece in the show, which I could compare to, and preferred this because I think it was even more mysterious. It's also, you know, the clue again is in the title and the fact that it's sort of family home, but it also makes me like think of strange things like Lowry, T.S. Lowry. He's a British painter from like the 19th century, where he would paint towns where there was so much fog and smog and pollution, and you can just see these kind of ghostly little figures, possibly. Because that's the other thing. The more you look, the more your eye questions itself, which I find wonderful. And again, tiny, but really intriguing piece of work.
Yeah, I agree. There's well, it's almost as though we have a show here, Samira, of miniatures. There's this selection that we found somehow but an incredible atmosphere in this. It
Yeah.
reminds me there was a Pictures Generation artist whose name I'm totally blanking on. Tony, what was his last name? He made very, very kind of grayscale paintings, and
Mm-hmm.
the image is kind of ever present as it is in a lot of those artists. But the aesthetics are just dialed up to the nines, just like this really obsessive kind of aestheticizing of the image. And the the point in which it becomes overboard, I think, is the point where it starts to become really interesting. And that's happening for me here too. Like the density of that space and the atmosphere and the ghostliness of it feels like it's just taken to such an extreme. I think it's something that often when I look at people who are really interested in the image, I'm like, where did they really go beyond whatever the source was and take it to a
Mm-hmm.
place that a source may not have been able to, and the artist kind of took over. And so, people can take that in so many different directions, and it's satisfying when it happens, satisfying in which that deviation takes place and some polarized relationship to the image happens. It tells me that their subjectivity found its way in there
Yes.
beyond simply wanting to render that thing or liking that original source so much.
Yeah, it's like the thing took over, and it was almost like it's drowned by the unconscious mind at this point.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
and that might be the whole force behind it. And the fact that it's called Family of Shadows is perfectly, obvious. I mean, suited to how that feels and would look.
Yeah.
Yeah, feeling.
Great. Following that is Deborah Kaplan's 3:18 a.m.
Maybe for similar reasons that I chose this one. Um, there's some really nice complementary pairings taking place here in terms of the selections that are happening in this alumni show. Here, I had this. I remember when I first encountered, and there was a few of these Kaplan works that were relatively close to one another. And I couldn't tell what the material was at first. I was like, oh, this is a photograph. And it took me a while to register that as being what it is materially. There was something about the construction of this that feels as though it comes out of a drawing painting practice. And then also something that feels as it comes out of like soft focus film. Like it's like speaking to other mediums in ways that I thought were compelling. And whatever its reproduction is such that it feels kind of lush as an image. Like that black feels like a really velvety black, dense. And the way that building and the background kind of emerges out of it is something that I feel like I recognize through again a number of other mediums. All of those things which kind of stopped me in my tracks and made me feel like, oh, I like when a photograph somehow feels a bit uncanny, and I no longer locate its medium specificity, if you will. And I think that's so hard to do, and I think it's something that photography has to now kind of contend with because photography is so ubiquitous and everybody's got a really sophisticated camera on their iPhone. So how do you make photography do something that photography normally doesn't appear to be able to do or reproduce in the ways that it typically reproduces, without some obvious kind of output? And I feel like I don't encounter that very often. And so here there was a curiosity that just initially drew me in.
Yeah, it's difficult to tell whether it's two images imposed to, printed on the same sheet, or is this, there are kind of letters that are happening in the foreground with the illuminated building in the background.
Mhm.
And there is something very digital about it, in that it looks like you could just take a black page and punch holes in it for the same effect.
Mhm.
It's that definitely black and white. There are no
Mhm.
grays here,
Mhm.
and that's quite daring
Mhm.
as well. Or
Something, yeah,
definitive. It's definitive.
yeah, yeah. The way in which like old film, like Kodachrome film, would have like high saturation in it, and you'd have these like strong contrasts, even with the black and white version of that. It's again another kind of nod to like a different reproduction kind of moment. But yeah, there is something about this that feels almost like you could manually do it. You could
Mm.
manually make something photograph this way, by hand, somehow make this process.
And we don't know, I mean, I don't know what digital photography means anymore anyway.
Right.
Um, like, what is the method here? Are there two merged images? Is it one image?
Hmm.
And I like the fact, it's sort of microcosm, macrocosm. It's like, the same mark in the foreground is made smaller over there, but they describe totally different places and things.
Hmm.
Yet it's reduced to a white dot.
Right. No, exactly. I feel like graphic design and photography are the most complicated, compromised mediums out there right now. Everybody knows how to do it. And maybe 20, 25 years ago, a handful of people knew how to have a certain output that they felt was correct, or sanctioned by those kinds of communities. And now it's like flooded, just entirely flooded with people somehow kind of picking it up and adding water and being able to have a relationship to it. I agree. I have no idea what digital photography even supposed to mean.
Mhm.
Does that mean that there's some after effect that's happening through after the photograph has been done? They're bringing it into Photoshop, or what
Exactly. Or a dark room, or
or
like,
right.
but also everything we're looking at today is a digital image.
Hmm.
This is our medium now. And that's the
Yeah.
other, quandary here, in this whole format.
Hmm. Yeah, we're kind of talking about things that have been like resized, repixelated to fit to screens. Um, I like when artists can start messing with that, or start to see that as like part of their work, that they're manipulating these kinds of conditions, but are not just playing up to them,
Mhm.
or blindly accepting them somehow as part of the thing. Yeah.
Great. Here we have Jeff Joyce's 11420 Sharon, Connecticut.
Mm. This um, is a collection of lines. And I just um, think it's sublime and pure. And if you cover about the first third of it from the bottom, it's an abstract painting. Um, I enjoy it when so-called figurative painting becomes abstract, purely because there is no such thing as a figurative or a readable image until you're given the clues. Um, Everything is suspended in abstraction, and this is making it, for me, it made it very clear.
Yeah, the work benefits by its simplicity. I think this is an artist who um is dancing right on the edge of a kind of like calligraphic painting
Mm.
practice. They're like they're like a stone's throw away from Bryce Martin Cold Mountain paintings, you know,
Yes. Yeah.
speaking to that sensibility.
Yeah.
And yeah, which makes me curious about the directions that this artist is taking, will continue to take about, um, you know, maybe fully throwing themselves down that gauntlet and finding themselves really purely interested in the mark and in the form and in the kind of elegance.
Mm.
There are other artists who also have played with that edge. I think of like those Ellsworth Kelly drawings, which are so
Mhm.
wonderful, such beautiful, elegant drawings of a leaf, you know, a flower, and you're like, oh wow, like that exists alongside this very kind of analytic painting practice that's happening.
Mhm.
And yeah, there's something
And
about the framing. Go
it
ahead.
leaves color way, but it's like I know that this is not purely black and white. I get the feeling that it isn't, but
Mhm,
who knows? Um, there is a sense of the ghost of color, you know,
mhm,
but even that has been almost put aside for the formal um strength of this thing. It's just, well, it's very delicate as well, but
mhm.
yeah, it's I like things that sort of defy my ability to explain why. And this feels like also the complexity of nature and organic forms, and it also speaks to the eternity of possible lines, sort of, you know, nature as an eternal set of possible patterns as well.
Mhm. Yeah, this micro macro thing happens there too. Yeah. Mm.
Mm.
Next, we have a sculptural work by Paige Pedry, Vestige 2.
Yeah, you know, I was struck by the kind of uncanny nature of this as well. Like when I saw the materials clay on panel, I
Mm.
liked that these almost read as something very else than clay. Like they almost feel like some piece of tar, or like oil slick or tire, you know, something quite industrial to them. And I think that's a testament to the manipulation of the medium to kind of read as something other. I'm such a sucker for that. When somebody takes something and then takes some process that disguises it, transforms it, turns it into something that I no longer quite relate to or understand, I feel as though something interesting is happening. Um, yeah, and it's something that a number of artists from a different period have also been interested in. Like I think so many of the fetish finish artists out in LA were also interested in a lot of that sensibility of like, how do I make this thing, you know, that is aesthetics coming out of car culture. How do I bring those into the studio? Something like that. And here there's a kind of like, how do I take clay and then make it like read as something totally other than clay? Yeah.
Yeah, they do.
And it
Along with
also feels
jazz.
like
Yeah.
a fragment of
And I was once in a
something
concert in
else
this famous
that
jazz
we're not seeing the
a
total, the whole
saxophonist
thing. We're not
named Jackie
we're
McLean,
catching
who
a
was an
glimpse of,
educator.
you know,
Yeah.
something that's been
He's the
dug
only
up,
one I've ever
a
met was an
fragment,
educator,
I
a
guess. Yeah.
practicing musician, a father.
Yeah. And I guess
And
the
he thought
title
of it.
Vestige kind of leads us in that direction. Yeah.
Mm.
Archie Shepp teaches, doesn't Archie Shepp teach? For a while.
We have another sculptural work by Hager Scher Fletcher, There Will Be Better Days.
You know, Matt used to say that.
Yeah, this was
Yusef Lateef used to come with a big thing of albums.
I really enjoy sculptures that play with natural forms and natural materials juxtaposed with paper, you know, other things, whether it's paper or glass or metal, and where these things meet. and this was just and the fact that, you know, there is a kind of shiny element and almost jewelry like aspect to the top of it, and then the bottom reads as almost legs that like hairy shoes, and you know, you can apply the image, an image to the materials and the materiality of it. But it's also sort of it's such a humble piece of work, an attempt at something that it feels like it could have been the beginning of something. Or, you know, it reminds me of when I started to make sculpture, and for me the most difficult thing was to make it stand up, to make it a thing, no matter, you know, whether it was a figure. In sculpture, it's just, you know, the miracle is making something three-dimensional and to make it stand up. And it has that kind of desperate effort to it too. And then it also has, which my own sculptures have, so this is not a derogatory, a kind of animist voodoo kind of feel to it as well. And the fact that I don't know, you know, there will be better days, you know, it's just, it's pretty open. And that's what I enjoy about it.
You know, it's like.
No, I agree. I agree. I think here there's this like quality to this one that feels as though it's like a maquette, you know, but then also is like full of all of these qualities that feel quite fleshed out and decided. So it's a middle ground in an interesting way, and it has like a kind of miniature quality again with the 13 by 13 inches, you know. It's like another one of these things that in a gallery setting might almost overlook it, but then has this kind of presence that you know we keep kind of coming back to.
The next work by Edmund Praeby, sorry for this errant A, Brick Dress Stone was selected by both of you.
Great minds.
Yes. It's like, hang on, is it? It reminds me of the glasses and still life, in that it's kind of the immediacy, the simplicity of the setup, makes me think of Morandi as well. And it's just literally, how do I describe different qualities of things like fabric, stone, brick? It's as elemental as it gets, and there is an image as well, a postcard in the background. It feels like the existential reality of being alone with one's stuff, one's thoughts too.
Yeah, there's something almost about classification here, like the way that this artist is thinking about laying out a set of objects that somehow are an extension of self, or you know, they've because they've like there's almost no embellishment to anything. It also somehow heightens every little subtle mark and description as somehow having a lot more packed into it. A real kind of exercise in how subtlety can win an audience over in terms of its power.
It's also like an intelligence test. It's like which of these things, you know, one of those, I don't know, where you have to pick the odd thing out. So it really does, it really invites a meditation on it. That's what its power is.
It works.
Up next, we have Elaine Ball's What I Know.
See, what I know is that painting hands is really hard. And after 30 years of making work, I am now giving myself into realizing that that has to be done. And it's because there are so many ways the fingers can move. You know, there are all these digital possibilities with the hand. And then there's this whole other aspect of hand painting where what does it mean? The gesture, the mudra, the possibilities of, I mean, the hand at the bottom there with the claw type grasp, the hand is a stand-in in this. It's like an exercise for this artist. The hand is a stand-in for so many potential narratives, emotional storytelling, that I found this extremely powerful and a really brave attempt at that. Just looking at, and it makes me think of the Michelangelo drawings where you have fragments of, he'll do an entire figure, and the edge of the page there'll be a close-up of a hand, and there's a sense of real inquiry and study here.
Yeah, there's a quality here that has a like maybe it's the dramatic lighting that's taking place in this painting. Everything feels as though there's a hot floodlight on that hand, and up against that kind of black background kind of creates this strong contrast. And I agree, there's a lyrical quality, maybe a bit by the way that each hand has been placed in relationship to the next, that it feels as though there's a narrative there without there being any sort of setting or scene or other kinds of characteristics to place and jump onto. And I think that's not easy to do, given the severe limitations that have been decided upon here. And again, another contender for best miniature painting in our miniature painting show. We have another 16 by 16 inch painting. So I feel like a running thread for a lot of these artists in this alumni show is the way in which they're thinking of the limitations of scale, and then what they're able to kind of accomplish with that. And the answer is a lot.
Really happy.
And the sense that making complete paintings and scenes that mean stuff is not always the point. It's like that we're always the student. We don't stop learning this stuff, and every so often, once we go back to something this elemental, it's like, how do you draw the hand? Something magical happens by that. The task, the simple task that you give yourself, or the seemingly simple task, because it never is, it turns into a complex thing like this.
You both selected works by Mary Shea, but different works. We have Apparition on the left and Doorway on the right.
Yes. Process as subject is what I saw here. And what I mean by that is that with a charcoal, with charcoal paintings, drawings, you can completely erase something. And the choice here was not to do that completely. And that the material or the thing you're doing sometimes will take over. Like we were saying earlier about the very dark painting of the house. It feels like the artist took suggestions from the surface of the drawing, which I really enjoy. It's very fluid. It's very, ethereal, there's transparency, there is like this mysterious figure that is silhouetted, and then an even more mysterious figure in the foreground that's supposed to be giving us more information that gives us less information, or is an apparition, as its title suggests.
Exactly that. There's I feel like this is an artist who's interested in the surface of things, and then trying to kind of like figure out how to conjure up that. Everything feels it to me in these drawings as though they're like everything is like rain that has recently happened, and now everything's wet with reflection on it. Like there's like that kind of dimension, which makes them really seductive and quite abstract as well. Um, I think of other artists who are also interested in like I'm like just consumed with the material surface of an object, and I'm like, oh, like that's Wayne Thiebaud, like that's so what an artist like that is trying to do, and so it lends this abstract, mysterious dimension, because it's like, well, at the end of the day, it's also this scene of a cat in a doorway or this person on a chair. But where it dropped me is someplace quite else. And I think that's the strength of these works.
Mm. Yes. And inside, outside. And apparitions in both. I mean,
Yes, very much. Yeah.
Julia got it.
yeah, they're very strong.
Great. I think we have three left. So up next we have Fran Shalom Yield.
I've also been familiar with Fran's work for a number of years. And I like that these are paintings where there's a like idiosyncratic decision making taking place. I mean, I think that's kind of what was referred to, right? Like about 25, almost 30 years ago, idiosyncratic abstraction. And Tom Niskowski was the ringleader of that kind of thought in terms of an abstract painting. And the decorative nature of this red, white kind of moment here in the center of this yellow form, surrounded by this field. I have like this sense that Fran is like looking at something very specific and then reduces it, and I have no longer the clues as to what the specificity was, but there's like this extreme intentionality taking place. And I like how that's dialed in this painting. A graphic quality too, to the palette, that's playing off of some other more subtle moments as well.
It makes me think of a hand holding something. There's a sort of the squishy, fleshy interior that's framed by something much more substantial and architectural. Yeah, it could stand for a lot. And my screen is showing me that the background is a mixture of purple and brown. I have no idea whether that's true or not, but I would imagine that if I saw this for real, its painting surface would be very important to itself, because it's an oil painting and not a print, and the structure of it is seemingly simple, but I do sense that, like, there's some spaces in the white. There is some painterliness that I can detect in the white and the background. And that would be very satisfying to see.
Mm-hmm. Next, we have Marie-Claude Giguère's Ghost, See You in 2 Weeks, Dad.
When I first saw this, I didn't know what I was looking at. I thought, yes, collage, but that was the extent of it. And then I realized that it was archival inkjet print on textured Intrada paper. The fact is that there's a sense that each of these descriptive surfaces, like the mother's dress and the wallpaper, and that each had its own, has its own pattern. And then there's a raise of the edge, that it's not completely stuck down. There's a lot of decisions that are being made that is not just about image, it's about how the image is made, the process. The title of this, and this artist had a second piece in the show of, I think it was a car on a freeway, which was, it also had this quality of, it's deceptively childlike, simplified, even, the title and the idea of this is about real life, and how parents co-parent. It packs a lot in terms of subject matter, the way it's done, and it's not faux naive, it's not that, but it's a child's eye view. And it's kind of remarkable on all of those levels.
I agree. I mean, I think something that also is a through line in this alumni show kind of selection that we're looking at, is that there's a number of artists who are thinking about the everyday. They're thinking about the quotidian, and they're trying to find a language for it.
Yeah. Great. The mirror behind the door, for example. I mean, if you block out the rest of the painting and just, that's enough already. It's just, there's so many little areas that the eye can go and find things. It's very satisfying.
Great. And this is the final work, the 20th work. Thomas Stavovi's Untitled.
I think this is a strong one. I think this work feels as though there's a quality to it that is there's a handmade industrial. It's somewhere between the hand and an industrial process. It's somewhere between something that feels as though there's intentionality and an offhanded, unresolved dimension to it. And I think this artist is somebody who's kind of like working between these kinds of poles, between these kinds of boundaries, things that are almost on they're almost on the line of like not working as an object. The way that armature is then like feels like a cast plaster space underneath it, and that armature is reading through. It almost feels like just like a pedestal that like you might see for a museum, for a vitrine, like there's so many things here that are like self-questioning as a sculpture that I think are interesting questions to ask about its legitimacy. I think there's not enough artists who think about doubt. I think doubt is a really profound and meaningful place, because who has a lot of surety about much any longer culturally, in terms of climate change, in terms of the economic, political landscape, cultural landscape. I feel like there's more doubt than surety, and I feel like that's something to actually lean into as a form of content. We're not living in very solid footing times, and so I think works like this that play with that boundary are interesting.
Yeah, and it feels like it's trying to break out of itself, in that it makes me think of it's a metaphor for the fact that we are surrounded by the grid. We live in the grid, but there's this desperate attempt um, to make something out of that, and to use materials that could transcend it. But yeah, this is you're right. It's a feeling of like I made this thing, but then I stopped, and it does have doubt. And it does say to me also, it got this far, and then the wire implies etc. etc. Imagine this going on and on and on. Do you know what I mean? It's like a half finished building that you would walk past on it, around, I'm in Midtown Manhattan. So, I see various levels of, this is sculpture, but this is architecture. And it's amazing that there's people making these buildings, that they're made of stuff. And I think that every so often we need to see it, to be reminded of it. And this makes me think of that too.
Right. No, that's such a good point. There's so much work in general that like is actually about hiding or obscuring its materiality in a desire for a certain kind of idea about slickness or manufacture or what have you. And yeah, there's something nice about kind of being able to be reminded about what material is. And somebody who's not necessarily trying to wow me either. I think Rachel Whiteread is somebody else who, especially those early works or works that are like, these aren't trying to wow me. She's cast a corner of a thing,
Yeah,
like
I
like
mean,
like it's so banal. And it was like, oh,
that was
it's
groundbreakingly banal, though. That was
truly,
just like saying you go past concrete every day, you just
yeah,
don't see it.
right, right,
You know, it's making you see what you live in and with.
yeah.
You don't want to load up people with all this work.
Terrific. Thank you both. And I want to just extend an well-deserved congratulations to all of the award winners. We have quite an array of work. It's been really wonderful hearing you both talk about what you're seeing, what you're drawn to in your selections. I invite anyone, if you have any questions for our jurors, to please type them into the chat or the Q&A button. As you're sort of thinking about those questions, I'm happy to announce that we're just putting the final touches on the alumni catalog. That'll be coming out soon. So check your inboxes, check our social media, check our website. You'll be able to order that. A special issue, we've redesigned it this year. The artists aren't just alphabetized from beginning to end. We've sort of made something of a yearbook. So those artists who participate in this year's show who were at the school in the 1960s, you have your own section with some historical photographs laid into that section, and each decade has your own section with historical and archival photos that we've been scanning to celebrate this special year. And we also have a really exciting Mercedes Matter radio interview she conducted at the very end of the very first year that the school existed. So she's talking about, basically her philosophy and pedagogical underpinnings of the studio school. I want to note that Catherine is a wonderful resource for those in the alumni community to share any exhibitions you're in, any publications, any reviews you've written. We love to collate them and share them with other alums, but also our broader community at large. So please stay in touch at Catherine's email address here. And when in doubt, you can just email the info@nyss.org email address. And we have our exhibitions are up on our website for this upcoming year. Currently, we have works by James Howell. And I invite you this Friday at 6:30 to join us for a panel discussion with the director of the James Howell Foundation, the curator of the show, Sylvia Benedetti, and Alistair Ryder, the art historian. That'll be both in the gallery and also live streaming. We'll have a show celebrating Graham's work, many, many new works that are coming right out of the studio that no one has seen. That'll be up for about 2 weeks from the end of October through early November. We then lead into an exhibition of work by Pat de Groot, a fabulous Provincetown painter, and then an exhibition curated by Karen Wilkin of Jim Condren's work. And Jim, as many of us know, is an alum of the school. So lots of programming coming up around these shows. And next week, we are starting our fall evening lecture series. So stay tuned. Again, most of these are in person. Some of them are virtual only. You can always join online from wherever you are by registering on our website under each individual talk. We're really excited. We have Richard Tuttle and Jack Flam and Daniel McKinney, John Elderfield, EJ Hauser, many different voices up ahead. And then, of course, we have our annual benefit coming up in October. This year, we are honoring Graham, who's becoming Dean Emeritus. And we still have some cocktail tickets left. So feel free to head over to our website or email any of us here at the school if you're interested in getting a ticket. And we'll also be having a silent auction. Here you can see this list is still in formation of some works that will be available as we fundraise for the school, celebrate our 60th year, and celebrate Graham's tenure here at NYSS. So I'm just going to see if we have any Q&A. Oops, sorry about that. Any Qs coming in? You must have answered everyone's questions. It was a very thorough conversation and really, really fun. So congratulations to all of the award winners. Jason, Samira, this was a real pleasure and a real honor to get to look at these works with you. So thank you for taking us along with you today.
Thanks so much for having us.
Yeah, it was
Sure.
it was fun. I was hoping for questions.
Caitlin, Catherine, any
Okay, 2 more
questions?
minutes. Question time.
Sneak some in there.
Yeah.
These
Oh
comments
well.
are so amazing. I really enjoyed hearing your thoughts on which work stood out to you. It's wonderful.
But everything that, you know, that I may have overlooked and you selected, Jason, I was just, you really opened up those pieces to me. It was such an amazing thing to see them, you know, through your eyes.
Yes, I feel the same way. There's something quite nice about being in conversation with someone who can kind of like open up a space. So this was a treat.
Yeah.
Especially when you had 175 to go through.
Yes. And, you know, and not seeing the real thing. I mean, this is why size, you know, wasn't an immediate consideration, you know.
Something.
I guess one final question maybe that I'll ask that is quite broad and quite open for our alums is if you have any advice or thoughts about making, you know, what are your concerns as an artist? What are you seeing, feeling in the studio? Any sort of just words of wisdom to share?
You want to go first, Jason?
I see what you just did there. I think it's gosh. I mean, maybe in light of how expensive New York City has got, I think it's so important to kind of figure out how to maintain a practice that is flexible, that can adapt to all the kinds of changes, upgrades, downgrades of studios, and Like what's the thing that somehow most important in the work to kind of maintain despite all of those changes. I think it's a question I ask myself. I think it's a question I ask my students. It's a changing, shifting landscape, and like what do you need in order to kind of do the thing?
Yep. And how much do you need to do the thing?
Mhm.
You know, I think that that's a serious question because I don't know. I I I can't imagine my life without it. I do it because I need it, and I there are practical considerations. I mean, the other day I was loading some things into my car, and I realized I measure my canvases according to what I can fit into the back of my car.
Hmm.
Not that I'm delivering work all the time. It's not that, but that's one of the things that I need to know, in order to transport my work if I need to do that. And I think it's important to have community. I think this is why, EFA, the Elizabeth Foundation, has got 75 studios, and people are in and out. A lot of people are working as well as making art. And however, we have pretty stable community. And I think without that, making work is a pretty solitary undertaking. And it does take a village, just to keep one, sane, and just to have a place in the world amongst those that are just, that everybody else is like running around making money and making meaning in that other way. um you need to find like-minded. um
Oh, Samira might have frozen.
Well, to well,
I
well,
do
to
have.
yeah.
Mhm.
Well, I was just going to
Oh, go
say
ahead, Jason.
to that point, I was going to piggyback off of what she was saying. Maybe she'll come back, but I think no, I think it's so huge. Without the community part, there's there's just the marketplace, and everybody wants to be able to have a sustaining art career that they're not going into debt over trying to have, but it cannot really be sustained without a sense of community. It's just it can feel quite soulless if all we're focusing on is the market. So I hope in a post-pandemic world there's a lot of people who see the value in that. I sure do.
There's an amazing community of alumni of this school. So, it's a great lead into how wonderful it is to be part of the tradition of having graduated from the New York Studio School. Love these conversations. My life would be sad without them.
No.
We do have a question that's come in. Jason, you might be on your own for this one. The question is, and again, you and Samira selected 20 of 175, so there's a lot more work in the show. But this question is perhaps drawing upon what we saw today. And Pool writes, is there a reason for the emphasis on the subdued and subtlety? And is it perhaps a reflection of our troubled and insecure times?
Hmm. Um, I think I'm drawn to those qualities, whether or not it has to do with this cultural moment or not. I think those are just virtues in art. I think subtlety, understated work. Uh, I I actively dislike how we're in this culture of and I think this is a kind of an American painting phenomenon to some degree, but like bigger, louder, more in your face than you. I think that's actually, I don't think Americans quite always understand that to a number of other cultures is actually obnoxious. Like that's an obnoxious artistic or creative endeavor to kind of be bigger and louder than your next door neighbor. Um, and I think subtlety, complexity, nuance are things that allow us to speak in a much more broad and much more interesting way than something that's beating you over the head with its obviousness. I won't name names because I don't want to be canceled, but there are plenty of artists who I think participate in that kind of artistic approach. And I think it's short-sighted and I think it's quite limited as well.
Sorry, I'm back. I don't know what happened. It just glitched out with me.
Well, we really appreciated what you were saying about community. And Catherine was mentioning too, the one thing that the studio school that I've observed since I've been here is the way that the school instills a studio practice so that our alums go off and have jobs and have families. But there's a sort of return to the studio that I see that our alums are sort of capable of, but they're also always coming back to the school in some way, whether it be through a virtual program or a marathon or a class, and I think one thing that the school does pretty well is to try to build an extended community beyond just built walls in some ways. Because I think your point's really well taken about your experience at EFA, for example.
Yeah. I mean, I lovingly call it's like it's a church. It's not just a building. This is not a brick building. This is a community. And the idea is, you could say it's religious, it's the Sangha, but that's what we're made of. That's what, without that, it's not possible, because we take meaning from each other as well as, so I think that's the alumni part of this is very important.
Mhm. And Samira, we did have a question come in, and Jason was just addressing his thoughts on this question, which is there a reason for the emphasis on the subdued and the subtlety in a lot of the work that we saw today? And is it perhaps a reflection of our troubled and insecure times?
Well, that would be an interesting idea for a show. Yeah, the subdued. Yeah, they're not, you're right. There wasn't a lot of jubilant. I mean, so Jason's first one with the flowers on the table, the still life with flowers. I think we're in a time of introspection for sure. And I think that you could say that is not, just because one is introspective, it doesn't mean one is depressed. It's it's okay for society should be able to handle that aspect of what it is that we do also in order to find ourselves. There is an inwardness, and I think art lends itself to that very easily. I mean, that's where it comes from.
Terrific. Well, I thank you both for your generosity of time and spirit and expertise. This was such a fun way to spend the early evening today. And I think we all just really could keep listening to you and look at works with you. So thank you again very much for being our Mercedes Matter jurors.
Thank you very much for having us.
Yeah, thank
having
you.
me. I'll speak for myself. And I look forward to seeing the catalogue and revisiting the works in that. And I assume that there's going to be some kind of essay or writing or something.
Yeah, there's a short text in the catalog, and so I'm happy to get that in the mail to you once we get them from the printers.
Okay, good.
Yeah,
Looking forward to it.
terrific. Well, thank you all again, and have a wonderful night, everyone. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Bye-bye.
Nice to meet
Take care
everybody.
now.
Bye.
You too.